Hey everybody, I'm Tarl Yarber with Fixated Real Estate, and we're here at one of my properties in Tacoma, Washington. We've owned this property for 2.5 years, roughly 2.5 years. We bought it back in January 2018, and we've talked a lot on this channel about BRRRR, buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. And it's very rare on this channel that we get to go over an entire full cycle BRRRR with you guys, to where we bought it, explain to you guys the rehab, show you guys even before photos of what it used to look like before we actually bought this thing. There's a nasty story on this property. It's kind of crazy. The situations that happened to this project before we bought it. The neighborhood was so happy when we got this project. After fully rehabbing it and putting it all back together, we then rented it out for the last 2 years. And now we're ready to sell this thing in 1031 exchange. So throughout this video, we're gonna go over all the numbers with you guys in depth. We're gonna go over all the stories, challenges. We're gonna show you guys what we did this project, some of the issues we had even with tenants, and go full circle, full cycle of what a BRRRR property is all about. Buy, rehab it, rent, refinance, repeat, and in this case, sell it and 1031 it into something else. So, what did we buy this thing for? We bought it for $125,000 in 2018, January-ish, and then we put $65,000 of rehab into it. After holding on to it for roughly about 5 months or so, we then decided to refinance it instead of sell it and put a tenant into it. Now, we could have sold it in 2018 for $270,000 at that time, and we would have made about around $42,000, $45,000 or something like that in net profit, and that would have been a great flip. But luckily, we decided to rent it out. And over the last 2 years, we've been renting it out for $1,895 a month to the same tenant this whole time. Now, when we're going to go sell this thing next week, we're going to put it on the market for $330,000 instead of that $270,000. And hopefully it'll sell for a lot more because there's nothing on the market right now. We're going to take advantage of that. So by the end of this video, I want you guys to ask yourself, would you 1031 exchange this into another property? Or would you keep the profit that comes out of it? We'll go over the benefits of that as well at the end of this video, so you guys can understand all the cool things that we get to go through as real life investors. So let's check out this project and let's talk more about it. All right. So first off, when we got this house, it used to look nothing like this whatsoever. And we'll show you guys some photos here in a second, but right here in this area here, it's all good, you stay there. For right here, there used to be this massive RV. This ugly, 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 ugly RV. And we'll hopefully show you guys what that looks like. But it was just stacked to the entire roof, completely full of trash. It was hollowed out. It was completely nasty, big time, right? There was old cars everywhere. People were living in them. This was not a squatter house. A bunch of people were not squatting here. The owner of the house actually lived in the house. Now it was vacant for, sorry, it wasn't vacant. It had no power and no running water for 3 years. The guy was a gentleman that enjoyed the company of others that also enjoyed doing a lot of drugs, right? So while they were doing those drugs, they then wasted all the money on everything that they had and made the house very beautiful and very smelly. And they were burning garbage in there for heat, everything. It was pretty messed up. But the best part about this property, when we got rid of this RV, the entire neighborhood here was out on the streets, literally in lawn chairs, watching this thing get hacked up and carried away and stuff like that. And they were clapping. Police officers, no joke, showed up. We're excited about this whole thing getting completely remodeled. So you do good for the environment and also the community when you do these projects. So don't forget that. This also used to be a finished garage space. So this was not a garage. It was a garage at one time, a long time ago, but we found for the value of this property, we needed to reconvert it back into a garage because when we first got it, it was living space inside. So let's check out what the actual inside looks like. Now, they used to have a bathroom at the outside of this property. It was the bushes around the corner over here. It's been gone for a few years, but the neighbor to the right over here on the side would let us know regularly that the tenants that lived here, or sorry, the owner that lived here, did not like to use the restroom in here since they didn't have any running water. So they had dug a bunch of ditches in the back over there specifically for using the restroom. And he was very happy that they stopped using that restroom over there in the middle of the night at 3, 4, 5 a.m. yelling at each other. So this fireplace has a unique story. First off, there used to be a door here that went into the garage, right? So we had to remove all that. But all of this used to be kind of sooty looking, a lot of black soot, a lot of smoke in this property and stuff, because this was kind of a failed chimney, but yet they were putting a lot of garbage or whatever they could find into this fireplace to be able to burn for heat in the winter, since they didn't have any power and any water. The unique story about this is that the gentleman that owned the property, he actually inherited it through a estate. he also received a certain amount of money for the estate, and he asked for it in cash. Well, his sister, from what the police officers have told us about the projects on this property, on this particular property, the sister was trying to protect her brother in some way, got really angry at him, came over here because the guy asked for $40,000 cash. That was his entire inheritance, and plus the house, and was of course going to use it on drugs. So the sister came over and she took all his cash and threw it into the fireplace and burned it, right? And the police had to come here. The police were telling this whole story to us about the entire like fiasco that was going on. Not because, and she wanted to burn it, so that's maybe that he didn't then smoke or snort it or whatever the heck he was doing, or shoot it up, actually, is probably what he was doing. And we met the guy, he was a nice guy. And but that was different. There's a lot of other stories that we're not gonna be able to get to in this video. But besides the point, we completely rehabbed this thing. In order to get rid of the smoke smell, that was the most horrible thing we had to deal with on this entire project. We had to gut this entire house, every single fixture, every finish, everything you can imagine, the flooring, whatever you could find, we had to get rid of all of it. And we had to do something called oils-based kills. Oils-based kills is probably one of the best things you can use to be able to get rid of the smoke smell and also other smells. And you just do multiple layers of it as much as possible until you don't smell it anymore, right? And then you can go back to putting what you need to do onto these projects. So besides that, we'll go back there in a second. Most of what else we had to do was a lot of cosmetic updating. So we updated the kitchens, we did this. This is one of our cheaper finishes for all of our rentals. We tend with BRRRR rentals, buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat, to be able to upgrade all the finishes, including putting tile in for this particular market, laminate luxury vinyl planking for the flooring. We put actual like soft close drawers, all that great stuff into our projects because the comps support it. Now for you, wherever you are in the US, your comps might not support putting quartz countertops in and real solid wood cabinets and so forth into these things, or stainless steel appliances even. So check out your comparables in your market to know if that's something you need to get the highest value, plus also the highest rents that you can get for your particular market. So this was all a mess. Of course, we gutted it, redid it. The garage, we found that it was going to be way more valuable in this property to actually have a garage. So pretty straightforward. Voila, we have a garage, right? So a one-car garage in this neighborhood, way better. And we figured that out because of the comps and comparables for this particular project. We're always going to hear us say that. Any savvy investor is going to tell you, what do the comps say? That's what you're going to do, right? But we upgraded the entire systems in this project. We upgraded the electrical, we upgraded the plumbing, we upgraded the entire HVAC system. We upgraded everything, right? So nothing was not touched. And you guys will be able to see that throughout the before photos. We didn't change the floor plan at all though, right? The floor plan besides the garage itself is the only thing that we changed. The rest of it was all cosmetic. Now, one of the things that we do that's a little different than maybe some people in this business is we use the same finishes for everything, right? So now, by everything, we have technically in our projects, we have 3 styles of projects for what we do. We have our lower end brown tone in this case, in this area here, so because it's more of a brown tone, only because the cabinets and also the flooring has like a grayish brown to it. And then we have our gray tone, which is more for our mid-century modern type properties that we have. And then we have our high-end projects. We're usually a high-end modern that we like to do as well. So those are the 3 types of projects that we use. Now, each one has its sets of finishes, right? And we're able to change our finishes really quickly and easily without having to redo them over and over and over again for each house that we actually have. So in this particular house, whether we were flipping it or whether we were renting it out to other people like we did on this one in case it was a BRRRR, right? This is the exact same tile, exact same patterns, exact same fixtures, except for this, our old tenant decided to put this one in, but the exact same toilet, right? Exact same faucet, everything's exactly the same, no matter what, including the base trim, doors, all that stuff, whether we were flipping this house or whether we were renting it out as a BRRRR. Legitimately, the only thing that I think we ever change in this style of the house that we do is the flooring. And it's whether or not we put a laminate in or a luxury vinyl planking in, whether it's a flip or a rental. Those are really the only 2 things we changed. Everything else is identical. And this was 2.5 years ago when we did this project, and we still use the exact same finishes, except we don't do the brown tone anymore. We use white. So that's the only thing that we changed is we use white cabinetry, and we just replaced everything out of that. But besides that, that's the only thing we changed. Literally, I'm looking at this place going like, this is the same stuff we do now, right? So kind of cool for us. Same doors, same millwork, keeps it simple, rinse, recycle, repeat. over and over again, same carpet, all across the board, no matter what. Now, that's the excitement of this project more than anything. Now we have the same tenants. One of the benefits we got from doing this BRRRR, let's go check out the master. So big master, we like that. You can also see the backyard's pretty big here too, which was another big selling feature for the project. Now it was pretty messed up. We actually had to hire a couple people to go out there and pick up needles for about 8 hours. And one day, Grace, my wife, who's also our property manager, she had to go out there on her hands and knees with everybody else, and they just started picking up hypodermic needles, glass, whatever they could find. And they were out there all day one day. And still, yet the tenant who was living here would still find stuff every now and then. His dog would find something every now and then that was not to be found or should have been found and so forth. But we did have a master as well. So this is pretty much the same layout. I think we expanded it a little bit, but you can tell everything's identical. What the hell, Alex? Sorry. So, Jesus, don't break your own stuff. Look, that's him. Oh, hey, you guys can see yourself. Wave to yourself. Hey. All right. So let's get into the numbers here in a minute. The most unique part about this project, which I love, we've done a few of these so far where we've done full cycle BRRRRs for these projects and so forth. But one of my favorite things about this is that when we've owned a project for a few years and we're finally able to sell it and 1031 exchange it into something better, potentially with the equity and the profit that we have left into this project. Now, I'm a recovering house flipper. I've been flipping houses for a lot of years, and we've done a little over 600 projects, right? So now, most of those projects we've sold, pretty much all of them, right? Now, as far as keeping it as rentals, this is still a new thing to me, right? I did not start to feel like a real life investor until I actually did my first 1031 exchange last year. So how weird is that, right? Can you imagine like doing that many projects over the course of your career and then you didn't really feel like a real investor until you 1031 like years and years later, like number 602 or whatever. And that's because when you finally are taking the equity of projects that you've actually built up, you've taken the cash flow that you've actually had in these projects as well. You get the tax benefits, which is a huge thing that I wasn't really aware of. If we would have flipped this house, we would have made about 47 grand, roughly, something like that, back in 2018, but we would have paid income tax on that. Like at least we would have, like full income tax. Now that we're 2.5 years later, we're gonna sell this thing. And when we get into the numbers, we believe we'll get about 130 out of it, right? That is, if we kept it, we're taxed at capital gains, right? But because we're not going to keep it, we're gonna put it into another project. It's going to be tax-free-ish, tax deferred into the other project, all that money, and we're not gonna pay taxes on that. It's gonna go into a different project that will, when we find it, we haven't found it yet, will be better cash flow, better equity potential for the long run, better all together, right? That's the goal, right? You get multiples of these projects, right? It's like Monopoly, 4 greenhouses, 1 red hotel, right? So you get 4 greenhouses and you put them together, you 1031 them into a red hotel, right? In this case, this is a single family home that hopefully we 1031 into a triplex, 4plex, small multi somewhere else outside of the Washington area where we are right now, right? So we're in search for that, right? Now we're gonna go jump on the desktop and we're gonna show you guys all the numbers in a lot more detail so that you guys can get more value out of this, and we'll see you guys in now. All right, so let's dive into the numbers in a little bit more detail. I actually have my numbers in front of me right now, so that way I can talk to you guys through them in explicit detail, even show you guys some settlement statements so I can prove to you guys that we're not lying about our numbers, unlike some of those HGTV shows, who knows. Anyways, that said, we bought this property for $125,000. Now, we ended up borrowing $195,000 on the property when we purchased it. Now, this was a really messed up property, and we showed you guys some before photos. So we had to do get a rehab loan for this project. We did that through a private money lender. So in order to do that, we borrowed $195,000, and after closing, we received back $70,000 for rehab, plus an additional $1,000 for our earnest money deposit that we put down. So we received back $71,000 at closing, and I'll show you guys that in the settlement statement in a minute. And we used $65,000 of that for rehab. Now, we budgeted $70,000 for the project, and we ended up only spending $65,000 for the rehab, so we were under budget, which is great. Now, when we were done with the project, we ended up reevaluating the project to see how much could we sell it for in 2018. So it took us about 4 or 5 months to get through the project. And in 2018, after appraisal, because we were actually refinancing it, after appraisal, it came back at $270,000 after repair value, which was really, really good. It was a little bit more than we thought it would be. If we ended up selling the property right then and there in 2018, we would have netted, after all costs, paying back the lender, all closing costs, we would have netted roughly $46,751 in net profit. Now, why that number is important to note in this analysis is to see, will you or would you have sold this property in 2018 and made a net profit of 46 grand? That's a lot of money, right? And there's some questions you got to ask yourself to why you would want to sell that property then versus possibly keeping it as a BRRRR, buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat, which is what we did, and then renting it out. Now, in this decision, we ended up renting it out. So with their appraisal of $270,000, we were able to get a loan for $202,500. So we got a loan for that at a 5.25% interest rate at that time, because rates weren't as low as they are right now in 2020 when we're recording this video. That said, we had to pay back our private money lenders. Remember, we borrowed $195,000, but we also owed interest and we also owed points on that money over time that we were borrowing it. So we ended up having to pay back a note, a private money lender note, for $206,806 to be exact, right? So that meant when it came cash to close, in order to refinance into our long-term financing of 30-year fixed loan at 5.25%, we had to come back to closing table with $13,993 in order to be able to refinance the property. Now, at that point, you might be asking yourself, if I sell this property, I can make $46,000. If I keep it as a rental, I have to put down and leave into the property $13,993. And that might make you change your mind whether or not you should keep this property as a rental over time. But there's a lot of landlords out there that would go like, wow, I only had to put $13,993 down on the property and I have a rental. That's awesome. And for some parts of the US, that is like less than 5% down payment on the actual property itself, when most landlords have to put 20% down. Now, with all those numbers and all those figures that you guys see right now, there's one more number you have to take into account in order to make sure you know if it's a good rental or not. And that's the actual rent that you're going to get for the property. Now, we ended up renting it out for $1,895 a month, so $1,895 a month. And we got pretty fortunate. We had the same tenant the whole time that we owned this property for 2.5 years. And we also never had any repair issues because we rehabbed the entire property. You guys just saw it. The whole property was completely repaired. So we rehabbed the entire property. We had no repair issues on it whatsoever. So we had no capital expenses the whole time we owned the property. Everything was brand new, all new electrical, plumbing, everything that you guys saw. No repairs whatsoever. So we netted after principal, interest, taxes, insurance. Principal, interest, taxes, and insurance payment for the 5.25% loan was $1,480 a month. Now, with no other expenses, no property management fees, no capital expenses, no vacancy, which we didn't have any of those things on this property the whole time we owned it, that means that we had a net cash flow monthly of $415 a month profit. Now, if we had any property management on it, which our company self-manages, so we didn't have to really pay anything for that, then it would have reduced a little bit less, maybe 6, 8, 10% of whatever the rents are, depending on where you are in your part of the United States. But for us, we were able to cash flow $414, which meant it was a yearly cash flow of $4,980 a year. A lot of numbers. So basically we look at these two numbers, right? If we want to circle them, is you have $46,700 roughly for net profit that you could be actually receiving if you sold it today, or you can cash flow $4,980 a year. Now, if you just see those two numbers alone, you might go like, I want the $46,000, please. Thank you. But there's some factors you got to consider. One is that, do you need that money right now? You have to pay taxes. When you go flip a house, you have to pay taxes on it. And how much taxes you pay is quite a bit compared to if you keep the property as a rental and hold on to it over time, right? Now, that's something I didn't really realize for a really long time when I was flipping so many houses, and we flipped hundreds of houses over the years, and we paid a lot of taxes because of that. But as soon as we started keeping some of these properties, we personally started paying less taxes on these properties altogether, right? It's amazing. It was actually kind of cool. It's one of the best ways to save taxes that we've figured out for ourselves, and it's up to you to figure that out for yourself if you should choose so. Now, let's go back to the money we had to put down on the property. We had to come to close with $13,993 after refinancing, right? So out of pocket, that's a lot. Now, if you just look at what we borrowed, here's the trick. We borrowed $70,000 for rehab plus our $1,000 in earnest money. We only spent $65,000 of it on rehab. So we had $6,000 left of a loan, technically, $5,000 plus $1,000 for earnest money that we put into it. So it's $6,000 still chilling. So we really only had to come back out of pocket with $7,993 to actually close the loan itself for the refi, for the final refi. With those numbers, all in all, with almost $8,000 out of pocket to be able to keep the property as a rental and $49.80 a year in annual cash flow, that's a 62.3% return on investment annualized on the money you paid out of pocket, or we paid out of pocket to keep the property. If we came up to you and said, we can give you a 62% ROI on your money, or you can leave it in the bank, which one would you take? So for us, $8,000, 62% ROI with the $4,900 a year that we were getting annual cash flow, it was kind of a no-brainer to us. Plus, we still had the equity in the property. So maybe we could sell it later. Pretty cool, right? So let me show you guys really quick on our settlement statement, just so you guys can see it in reality, what I meant earlier about that private money loan. And this is a bigger topic that you might have to watch in another video. We're not going to get into too much here on this video because it's a bigger topic, but let me show you guys my screen here really quick. All right, so here's the actual purchase and settlement statement that we used to be able to purchase this property. You can see that we bought it in February 9th, 2018. I, of course, blocked out all of our stuff so you can't track us. And you can see we bought the property for actually $110,000, but we had a $15,000 settlement charges. Those are all like assignment fees and a bunch of other expenses that went into buying the property. So roughly $125,000 is what we bought it for, as we said earlier. Now, here's that loan that I said. We borrowed a loan at $195,000 total, and that was purchase plus rehab. And you can see we had a cash out of $71,613. So therefore, we're not actually joking around about this. This is what we actually did. And now let's go into what we actually did for our resale and what our real numbers were after keeping this over the last 2.5 years. Now, we ended up keeping the property. So would you have kept it? Here's what happened. 2.5 years later, we decided to sell the property. The tenant moves out, and we put it on the market. We put the property on the market for $330,000. We thought, based on all comparables, that would be the best price to put it on the market for, and it was going to be pretty good. And we were pretty happy about that number. That's what we sold it for. Unfortunately, that's not what we sold it for. We unfortunately sold it for $370,000 over one weekend with multiple offers. The property went really, really fast and made me second guess. Should we have actually sold it? Maybe we should have kept it longer. Who knows? Now, we've owned the property for a few years. So remember, we had a $202,000 note. We were paying it off. So we had to pay the lender off, and that lender was $196,871 payoff. We listed it for $330,000. We sold it for $370,000. We also owed a concession to the buyer. So the buyer requested a concession to be able to help pay for their mortgage and any of their closing costs. So we gave them a $6,000 concession. So in reality, even though we sold it for $370,000 on the market, if you break out the $6,000 in concessions, it was technically we're netting $364,000 on the actual sale. And so that's still pretty good for us, right? Especially when you list it for $330,000. We had all these expenses at closing. This is one of the things that we forget when we go to sell a property. It might look good on paper. They have a bunch of equity, but when you actually sell a property, unless you're selling it off market directly to somebody on your own or whatever it might be, you have to pay for licensed agent commissions, right? Which can be anywhere between 4.5% to 6%, depending on who you're listing with. And you also, for the state of Washington, where we are, we have a 1.78% excise tax on top of property taxes. One of the benefits of paying that excise tax is we don't have state income tax here, which is great. So we had to pay all those expenses, plus your normal title closing expenses, settlement charges, property taxes that we didn't pay yet, all that stuff. And we ended up paying $27,298 in closing costs alone. So with closing costs, breaking that all out, that left us with $141,939 for what we call a 1031 exchange. Now, if we also add one more number to this whole factor, we collected $10,375 in net cash flow, net profit over the last 2.5 years of keeping that property. So when we invested that $7,993 in order to keep the property, we received back $10,375 in net profit just in our rental cash flow. So we had no money. We had all our money back, plus we had a little bit more profit. And now we have $141,939 to turn over into another property or multiple properties in a 1031 exchange, tax-free, not technically, tax-deferred is the better, actually it's the accurate term for that. Because eventually we might have to pay taxes on that if we go to sell these properties and not 1031 exchange. Now, what can you do with a 1031 exchange? You're first go talk to a 1031 exchange professional and they could tell you even more details as well as your CPA. Now, what can we do with it? What we decide to do is that we're right now hunting for properties currently. We have 45 days after closing to be able to hunt for properties. And we're looking at multiple states. We have a few lined up for it. And the goal for this is to take that $141,000 and that $414 a month in cash flow that we were receiving. And how can we take that $141,000, roll it into one or multiple properties to be able to increase our cash flow and our net ROI on that money? So if we have $141,000 to move, which is technically monopoly money for us because we created that through the BRRRR method out of thin air. Well, not technically. We actually rehabbed that kind of property and held on to it for 2.5 years. But we had no money. That's just free money for us for holding on to the property longer. So now let's take that $141,000 and we roll that into a couple more properties, and maybe we can get $600 a month cash flow, or maybe we can get $1,000 a month cash flow, or maybe we get $1,200 cash flow for it. With that same money, putting it into multiple properties instead. Now, there's a trick. We actually have to buy a property that's worth at least $1 more than what we sold this property for. And there's some more stipulations to that. Like I said, talk to a CPA or 1031 professional because your unique situation is different than our situation. But a good rule of thumb is spend $1 more than what you sold your property for. So in this case, we have to find a property for $370,001, right? Or a couple of properties that total up to that same amount as well. Lots of rules, lots of stipulations, but it's a super powerful tool. And it's very important today to realize how important this tool is, because the misconception with might be happening out there, especially in politics, is that it's a tool for the rich for taxes. Not true at all. There's so many families out there, your neighbors, your households, the people that have one or two rentals that use this tool to be able to finally build retirement and wealth for them and their family. And that's one of the best things about this. So you can completely defer your taxes until you've been able to accumulate it over time, your property values over time. And then at retirement, either pay the taxes or do some other strategy later down the line. So those numbers are pretty powerful to me. I'm very, very happy that we kept this property over time. And we now look at it going like, okay, we have no money in. We get $141,000 out. And thank goodness my past self decided to keep this property. So let's go back to the property right now and get some final thoughts from me. All right, now that you guys have seen all the numbers, you guys have seen this project full cycle BRRRR, right? Hopefully you're as excited as I am to actually get investing in stuff like this. Right? When I first started out and I specifically only flipped houses, I didn't really fully comprehend the power of real estate until I finally started doing things like this. And now we're upgrading to other aspects in our business and we're taking it to another level. There's so many benefits to actually keeping real estate instead of just flipping it, right? Instead of just wholesaling it, which are all great tools and all great things I've benefited from personally over the years of my life, like greatly benefited from. I just wish I would have done stuff like this a lot sooner. So make sure you comment, like, subscribe on the BiggerPockets. Listen to everything they have to say. Check out the tools. Become a pro member. It's totally worth it. I would have never kept this property and bought it if I didn't have the BRRRR calculator that BiggerPockets has today and the rental calculator. I would have just looked at straight as a flip and I wouldn't have realized the potential I really could have had. So make sure you guys do that. Follow me on Instagram at Tarl Yarber. Check out our company Fixated RE on Instagram as well as Facebook. One day, maybe other people like you can have a shirt like this as cool as us. We're essential. It's what we are, right? Real estate investors. And we'll see you guys at our next video.